Space, the final frontier. Okay, wait, so apparently I'm supposed to take away this orange background behind me. Give me a sec. Here we go. Also, my head got smaller. Space is terrifying. It's an infinite chasm of darkness and nothingness. There's no up, no down, no left or right. The best part about Final Space is that it tells a story about finding the light in that darkness. Final Space's 10-episode first season is created by Olan Rogers and it aired on TBS and Adult Swim, as well as being available on Netflix. It's a serialized show, so the entire season is a continuous story. So, I first came across the show with its pilot on YouTube. The pilot in itself is overwhelmingly good, starting the show off with an emotional premise, as well as setting up the stakes of a narrative. Psst, the link is in the description. The pilot gives a very dark twist to the generic introduction to characters that you'd see in an average cartoon pilot. Because the first time we see them, well, they're dead.
It's up to me now, Avocado.
All except for Gary, the main character who laments over his loss with a ship, before he would soon die himself. In fact, I made an analysis of a pilot more than a year ago on this very channel. The pilot, which also gave us a taste of the lore and the backstory with cinematic flair, raised the bar for the show pretty high. So, did it live up to everyone's expectations? Is investing time to watch the show a good idea? Well...
Gary, stay close.
Right, Gary. Get some street meat! It's wondrous!
How about covering up that dick situation you got going there?
Nice.
You sly fox. Jay! Oh my gosh, okay. I meant you icy minx. Stop! Danger? Panda? Oh! We're flirting! We're flirting! This is great!
Yeah, if you don't like a loudmouth blurting out sentence at warp speed, then there's quite a lot you have to sit through. Especially in the first few episodes when the show is trying to find its balance. Gary is a bit of a mouthful, and sometimes his banter is just unnecessary, and at high tension, high stakes moments, it's just very annoying and it ruins the flow of a story. He's kind of like that guy who keeps cracking jokes when everyone around is being serious. Funnily enough though, Gary's actually voiced by Olan Rogers himself. Psst, he's a creator of a show. If you're not familiar with him, then welcome to the YouTube animation community. Before Final Space premiered, Olan made a lot of animated content himself, and the rather jubilant traits of Gary's personality is found in many of his other characters, one of which is Dexter from The Lion's Blaze.
Oh, my nipples are erect from excitement! Yes! Oh, respawn him!
Legend says that he and Gary are the same character. Anyways, both The Lion's Blaze and Final Space are set on a pretty dark premise. Like, judging from the respective pilots, there's a lot of bad stuff going on behind the characters. On the surface level, it seems like the character traits offer comedic relief, but I get a sense that Olan created this juxtaposition as a way to show the characters as someone more real, albeit annoying. The first thing that we understand when we watch the first episode is that Gary is in space jail, and he hadn't seen anyone for around 5 years. His nonsense of a personality may have been a coping mechanism for this level of confinement. In my honest opinion, Olan's overhyped voice acting style fits someone whose only friend is himself, someone whose personality came as a result of catering themselves within their rather bleak surroundings, which in this case created a more self-centered character. Most people will find that as something bad, but since this is a serialized TV show, this means that there's an opportunity for Gary to grow as a person. But despite the characterization garnering some level of sympathy and optimism for the narrative, Gary is still pretty annoying. Olan himself actually addressed Gary's characteristics. In an interview with a Bubble Blabber, Olan promised a more composed, well-rounded show, from the constructive feedback. Hopefully that'll be the case, but meanwhile, you'll have to sit through a couple of episodes in the beginning with Gary being the most Gary. Another thing that's noteworthy in the Final Space pilot is the art. So did the actual show live up to that? Well, the most noticeable change are the character designs, and indeed, the changes are for the better, especially for the Lord Commander, Final Space's main villain. In the pilot episode, the Lord Commander's design is pretty standard, and it doesn't really stand out among other cartoon alien villains. However, in the actual show, the Lord Commander's appearance took a much more menacing turn. The wrinkled brain-like surfaces of a character looks far more appropriate for someone who acts like a complete psychopath. because later in the show, you'll see that Lord Commander has done some pretty screwed up things, and the initial character design in the pilot just wouldn't have done its job. Oh, and also, the actual show replaced Lord Commander's derpy looking sidekick with a character that's downright bone-chilling. Quite a nice fella, isn't he? As for the other characters, the design didn't change too much. The characters just now look more well-rounded and more pleasant to look at, that's all. Another thing that lived up to the pilot is the soundtrack. The show itself takes a lot of inspiration from space films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and Interstellar, and its soundtrack is no exception. Now, I don't want to be too technical here, but within the Final Space soundtrack, Jake Sidwell, the show's composer, masterfully used musical techniques to give a show its emotional kick. Basically, Jake, who's the composer, took these 4 notes and this melodic progression is subtly integrated into the various tracks within the score.
Harry, the cookies will be done in 2 minutes.
What are we making here?
You begin right here. With this guy.
We're the good guys now.
That, my friends, is called a musical motif. Okay, so motifs are nothing new. In fact, it's a commonly used technique in movie soundtracks. Now, Final Space is categorized as a comedy, and Netflix tags the show as imaginative and goofy. Which it is, don't get me wrong, but the creation of a soundtrack reveals an effort to create an emotional experience that goes above and beyond for something that's described to be goofy. Every time I hear that melody, I get a sense of optimism within a sea of emptiness. The emotional darkness awakened through the savagery and dementedness of some events within the story drains our hearts and makes us feel emotionally empty. The background art of space, which came from real images taken from NASA by the way, gives us a sense that the value of ourselves as individuals is empty as well, as our mortal lumps of flesh pales in comparison to the vastness of space. And then with that beautiful melody, which is often accompanied by the character's best moments, floods the nihilistic expanse of space and apathy with optimism, showing us how humanity, warmth, and tenderness will ultimately prevail. While researching for this video, I came across a range of opinions about the show. I see the show being criticized because of reasons similar to what I shared at the beginning of the video, Gary being irritated, hyper, and obnoxious as written by the AV Club, and because of Gary's characterization, it's very easy to describe the show as something goofy, pandering, or juvenile. But I don't think that the core of the show is supposed to be something edgy, goofy, or funny in essence at all. The core of the show is about heart, about humanity, and about finding light in the dark. Quite literally as well, because space is, well, pretty not luminous.
We wanted to do a serialized story, and there was drama, action, sci-fi, comedy. It's all fused in one thing, but it also has a lot of heart. Okay, because that's me. I have a lot of heart, and they have to understand that this thing, it's going to be sad. You're going to cry, but you're also going to laugh. You're going to laugh.
Personally, I think most of where we find all the heart and humanity is in the growth of the characters, which is honestly the best part of the show so far. And the character growth doesn't only center around Gary, but all the other characters as well. The main characters all have their own backgrounds and their own struggles, and the show reveals to us how they deal with them and become better people. If you watched my earlier videos, I talked about becoming better people for the sake of others, but in Final Space, the vast expanse of space means that there isn't a lot of people around you to be better for. Yet, Gary and those other characters still found the will to mature. Like, it kinda shows you that you literally don't have to be Mother Teresa to become a better person, but even being better to one person, or 5 in this case, is also worth it. And I think that's what this show is truly about. The heart within people contrasted with the darkness of space. Well, I've never thought that I'd go this far in a review, but here I am. Yeah, I do recommend watching the show, especially if you have a time. Season 2 has already came out, but is not on Netflix yet. So I hope issues such as Gary's character, some of the emotional moments not carrying enough weight, and some other minor problems will also be improved. That'd be nice. Anyways, instead...